Welcome to episode number 1 of Creative Conversations. And our guest today, after that lovely drum roll introduction, is Norwood Creech. And I'm going to get Norwood to tell us what her creative streak is all about, what she does, and we'll go from there. So Norwood, over to you. What do you do?
Wow. Well, that's a really big question, David. A lot of people would not want me to answer that, but I will answer that. First of all, thanks for having me. And this is a real treat to be in Australia, even from Northeast Arkansas to Australia. That's pretty cool to me. Okay, so like you're saying, I'm an artist. I'm a painter. I'm a third generation painter. So my grandmother did portrait paintings, history at the National Portrait Gallery in DC. My mother did watercolor portraits. She retaliated from the oil. I don't do people at all. I do, well, lately it's just row crop is what I'm known for here in Northeast Arkansas, which is a flat agricultural landscape filled with soybeans and cotton and rice. And that's about it. My creative process. Ooh.
I'm going to come back to that, Norwood. I'm going to actually just roll it back a little bit here, and I'll just let our viewers know that I will put a link to Norwood's website in the show notes, so you can go along and have a look at some of her art. And I was lucky enough to find Norwood a little while ago, and personally, I love what she does. So I'm sure you will too. I'm going to ask you. You've got a drink in your hand there, and I'm going to just start with that.
Holding up, no.
So I ask everyone to bring along a drink or beverage of their choice, and I'm going to ask you what it is and why you choose that drink.
This is a Kenya coffee bean. It's kind of like when I put in whole cream, it's like drinking liquid caramel all day long.
Works for me.
That's it.
So you just love coffee?
Yeah, it works. And then when it's early in the morning, then I'll add the protein to it. So, it's a full meal.
I've never tried that. Protein in the coffee.
Yeah. It's a collagen protein, so it's good for your nails and joints and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I tell you, my drink of choice is also coffee, and so I just have a little longish short black here, a little espresso, which is usually my morning coffee. And I progress through the range as I go, Norwood. I don't know about you, but I'll start with a black coffee. I'll end up doing a cafe latte some point in the day, and then I sort of wind down the day with tea, because I was raised on tea. So I progress.
Love.
But it's all got caffeine, and that's the main thing.
Hell yeah! Sorry.
That's all good. I don't
bar the door, Betty.
Oh dear. So I will start a little bit with, I guess, how you got started. So you're third generation artist. And I was going to ask one of the questions, yes. How did you know you were creative? I mean, it's great that you're third generation, but there's a point, I guess, at which most of us know that we've got some creative flair. Do you remember a time where you just knew it?
It's kind of complicated, thinking about how to answer it. Well, there's this place in Nashville with roller coasters called Opryland. And my mother and grandmother were on a trip driving to Opryland. And my grandmother's, one of her favorite things was to quiz me, when you're looking at red, what are your eyes doing? And then quickly to be followed by, what's the opposite of red? And since she also played music, she played scat blues on the piano and had a ukulele and an accordion and other various sundry things. She would ask me to put together a family of color and then include a minor chord. So it started really young, and I got really angry because I was tired of hearing this at the age of 8, or because my mother and her mother, both portrait artists, how many times do you want to hear nipple, navel, crotch, thigh, knee, nipple, navel, crotch, thigh, knee? So by the time I got to high school, I was rebelling against the rebellers. But the only thing that I knew, because I had heard all of the science of art my whole life, was that is all I knew. And now that I'm 54, I wish I had paid more attention, because they were giving me secrets that I was just really ticked off. I should also say that I'm an only child of 2 only children. So the focus when I was young was pretty intense. But by the time I got to high school and was like, well, you're going to go to college, the only 2 things I knew was soccer and art. And I had gotten my Coast Guard auxiliary license to be a charter boat fishing captain, but it really upset my grandfather, so I stuck with college. And I went for art and soccer in upstate New York. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
but because I didn't know anything else, and it was a forced hand to play.
So it was always going to be your career.
Apparently so.
You had no choice. Do you?
No. Even when I try other things, friends come back and say, "Stop that! Just go do art."
So has it always been? Has it always been your living, Norwood? Have you always?
Oh God, no! You know the statistic from 1993 is 0.1% of all artists make their sole income from art. So let's go over that again. 0.1% of all artists, and this was done in 1993, make their sole income from art. So
that doesn't surprise me. Sounds like musicians.
Yeah, you can't play on Beale Street. You still get $50 if you play on Beale Street in Memphis. You aren't going to get a full pay for a gig like what you would think. Yeah. No, so for the past 18 years, I've been a wife. That's changing. And I'm back to just what you were asking. You know, how do you make your sole income from this? I think maybe I peaked at close to $20,000 just selling the art. But it's usually supplemented by education. You know, I'm Lincoln Center trained to design education programs. I'm Kennedy Center trained to design education programs. I've got a wicked mind when it comes to that stuff. But to date, for the last 18 years, it's just been painting and printmaking and photography. In this marriage, where I am right now, and then before that was painting, and before that was designing education programs for museums.
Okay, so is your aim from here to make the art your primary income source? Are you?
Well, I've just come off a life course class.
Funny about that. That's where we met, folks.
Oh yes, yeah. With Mel Robbins. And
that's right, the wonderful Mel Robbins.
The wonderful 5-4-3-2. Get her done, baby.
That's it.
That is it. I learned through that there's some things that I cannot do, no matter how wishful I am, and that it is incumbent on me to work every day. Doing that life course with Mel Robbins was interesting to me because it changed my schedule in that the first thing I do when I wake up now is I try to draw something. But I'm traditionally a late nighter or all nighter. So I'm still.
Oh, I've lost you. Hang on, folks. You're still there, Norwood.
Producing, it's just changing around. Lack of sales would panic me. I try not to get in my way, and I keep producing.
Very good. I'm going to talk a little bit about process. I'll get you to talk about process because it's not about me. And I'm fascinated to get a handle on how different creatives actually go about the creative process, what they do, and how it's changed over time. So tell me a little bit. You've mentioned now you're drawing something every morning. That's part of your process, but you've traditionally been a late nighter. What is your standard process up to now? What sort of routine do you follow?
Well, since I'm leaving the married life, I am leaving the stop every day at lunch at noon and stop at dinner at 5, which is great. If I'm left to my own devices, I can work until the wee hours of the morning, but on average, I'm up by 9 o'clock. I have 2 dogs to walk, 2 dogs to feed, horses to check on. But it's like a meditation. The center comes back to doing the work. And during all of my everythings, whether I'm driving, and it should reiterate, I am in the middle of nowhere. When I'm driving, I'm always looking. The biggest challenge, if I see something really beautiful that makes me go, my biggest challenge is to stop what I'm doing and draw it, photograph it, capture it. But it's that, because that's, you know, we all want to make something that's going to go,
That's it.
You know?
Well, that's actually one of my questions was how do you capture those moments? So it's, So
You keep digging.
So part of
You
process
keep,
is,
you keep digging.
yeah. So, but okay, you see. I don't know. I've seen recently the water tower, for example, that you've painted, and
Yeah, over at Dice.
so
Over
you see that and you think, wow, in this light, in this moment, I love this. How do you capture
right.
that so that you don't lose it and you can take that and actually create it later?
Well, you talk to a voodoo man. No.
I need one
You
of
get
them.
down to New Orleans and you get some mojo because it's really tricky. Practice, baby, practice.
Do you carry around
Like,
like a notepad or you mentioned photo?
I do.
Or,
Even in the back of my I have a pickup and it's got a cab over the back.
Yep.
So I can actually sit inside the back of my truck out of the wind and the rain and the whatevers to draw on location. And in it right now are all the oil supplies. There's just no canvases. So it's like like one guy said, always have your art on you.
I love that. Always have your art on you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, especially like if you're going to go look at a gallery, you know, I keep it in the phone. Gallery people don't always like that,
No.
but that's on them.
So you just take those photos, and if they say stop, you apologize. It's
Or not. I mean, Jackson Pollock, from what I hear, walked right in and threw stuff down on a table. So, you know, it just depends on whose ego is behaving that day.
fair enough. I love that though. So always have your art on you. And is there is there a go-to tool for you though? Like you've mentioned that you've got your stuff in the cab. Do you prefer to capture a sketch in the moment, or photograph it so you've got detail that, or just rely on your memory?
No, I have a preference as to how I learn something. I like to learn from real life. To me, that's where the rubber hits the road. Because, David, I guess it is, since I'm the vehicle through which I'm looking at something and it's coming through me and coming out of my hands. When I'm learning, if I'm looking at the real thing, I feel more traction. There's more of a reality of a conversation. Like I can really see the tilt of your glasses, or I can really see where that reflection is on your glasses, versus making it up and going, haha, I'm whipping this out of thin air. The traction for me, what I enjoy is learning what's really there, learning how I'm interpreting it and responding to it, and mark making and going back to it. Most of the stuff that I work from is within a 20-mile radius, and I've been doing this for 18 years, the same stuff. It's regurgitated, rethought out. It's the same, but it's different. It's like Monet's haystacks.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. But once I learn it and get it down, where I'm finding myself these days is to get into more of my more personal emotion. And the reason it's tricky for me is because I have voices of my mother and grandmother, but getting to this acceptance of, okay, I'm bringing this to the table and I'm comfortable with this. This is scary for me. This particular line, there may not be enough color, or I hear my mother's voice going, do it, repeat it, oppose it, and look at it upside down and backwards. And that's how you figure, where I'm just trying to let go of that and go, hey, I've done this enough. I've learned this enough. It comes back to energy. And I see the energy and I feel the energy. How do I make it more about that energy and my energy with that energy? And then that's getting away from what was really there, but what inspired it, and gets more into, you know, when I grow up, I want to be Joan Mitchell, and I got 30 years to do it. So I try to, lately, as much as I've learned everything, trying to disassociate from the stories I tell myself when I look at, say, the Indian man over at Mark Tree. I see the Indian man and I tell myself these stories, and now I'm trying to not tell myself some stories so I can look at the light, I can look at the composition, I can look at the energy. It's like, you know, the lyrics to the song, but you really want to hear the music. Mm-hmm. Does that help in the analogy?
It does.
So it's a different, I find myself going into more nebulous territory for me, but, and I'm extremely reclusive, so it's not like I have a whole bunch of feedback. But with social media, the feedback that I've gotten, and not particularly shy people, they're educated, applied, aesthetic creatives, as you call it, the questions have been great. Well, why can't you call this art? So it's throwing down, it's challenging me to up my game and let go of my story and let the line and the color and the actual process itself become the subject versus I'm making a painting.
Interesting. So I was going to skip this question, but I'm going to come back to it because you touched on a couple of points with the voices of your mother and grandmother in your head. So
I don't mean to insult schizophrenia, but that's kind of
but we do tend to hear the voices of the past, and I'm curious about how that works within the creative process, because one of the questions I have here is, what challenges have you had to overcome to pursue your creativity? Now, when I mean your creativity, I'm not talking about as a whole, but your brand, your actual inner creativity that you want to get out.
Well, one of the things that I have been known to do, and this probably ain't going to surprise anybody listening to this, with a name like Norwood Creech, we do not, or I do not say up front that I'm a female.
And is this a challenge for you, or is that a?
It's a challenge for anybody who exhibits my work.
Right.
I have found in gallery settings, when it's my work and I do not tell people it's my work, it is usually interpreted as man's work. And there's much more respect given to it when it is from a male source than when poof, it comes from me. Often I get, you know how to do that?
Oh, really? So
bless my heart.
So is gender a challenge that you've had to,
yes,
a wall that you've had to come up against?
Yes, even my mother deals period antiques now, and I hang with some of America's finest 19th century artists. And there's a policy that she will not say, number one, that I'm her daughter, and number two, that I am a female. But that's one. A lot of bless your hearts, oh, isn't that nice, honey? You do art. Where I know I'm intelligent enough. I know I'm educated enough. I know that the work's good, but it's getting it past some of this other art that has been income producers for galleries that they're comfortable with, but my aesthetic is different. I'm not totally contemporary, but at the same time, I'm not totally traditional. Traditional galleries like that I do landscapes and still lifes, la 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 la. Contemporary galleries like that I do like crazy landscapes and still lifes, but neither one of them fit right in there. When I think of contemporary galleries, I think of you'd have a white piece of melted plastic for a couple $1,000.
Right. Yeah.
So, and then a traditional gallery would be more romantic and realists, And staying away from hotel art.
So going off from that, the challenge to overcome there, and then the resistance to actually doing, pursuing your art. Have you encountered difficult resistance over your lifetime to do that? Is it internal, external resistance, and how do you deal with that?
When you say resistance, what do you mean, David?
So that sort of, if you're pursuing art as a career, as opposed to something that you just, a little hobby on the side that takes up time. Have you had resistance to actually doing that? Does that make sense? Am I being clear?
Well, am I to say that the soon-to-be ex-husband considers what I do a hobby, when a bunch of the rest of the world considers this to be a professional career? Mm-hmm. Taxman considers this a professional career. all that shit's always there. There's always going to be some kind of resistance. It's showing up and it's still doing the work, and it's doing the work in spite of, the resistance.
Showing up. So is that
Well, yeah,
is
you got to show up.
Well, you do. So is that part of your
Unless
process?
You get somebody else to do it for you, and then you turn into Andy Warhol and you got a factory.
Exactly. Well, it happens in a lot of I guess genres, really where that can happen. But I'm curious in terms of the process, that how do you deal with those moments? So you mentioned turning up, and I think that's a big one in any form of creativity.
Sure.
Is it like a daily routine for you? Is it something you're always
yes.
doing?
If I go a few days without applying myself, I will have guilt and feel pressure from no one else but myself, and I have to make up for that. That's just how it is.
It's a need.
It's just the way it is.
It's just the way it is. Fair enough. So turning up is a big part. How do you deal with blocks? So obviously, I know for anyone I speak to about this, whether they're writers, painters, musicians, whatever, there's periods where you may want to create, but for whatever reason,
you're in the pit.
Yeah,
we call it being in the pit.
In the pit. So how do you deal with being in the pit? What do you do
when you're in the pit? I circle the pit. I try not to get into the pit. Yesterday, I hit a dry spell, and I'd been working on these watercolor crayons, and I thought, oh, no, I'm going to jump ship and work with these oils. I've got this great idea. I'm going to switch it to, and then all of a sudden, everything in me just kind of like went right down the commode. It was like, where did the energy go? What in the, and a little bit of panic, a little bit of anxiety. Flip side is I took off of myself the shackles of expectation, because I think that has a lot to do with getting into the pit and getting into these blocks. It's this anxiety that's not even existing yet, but I'm already in it. So to take off all of those restrictions and shackles, I have this little trick I do where I go back to photographs, and I allow myself, literally have to give myself permission to doodle and to free sketch, as though I were driving along and just going through my photographs, just drawing. It's like turn up the volume. The more I do, the more I don't care, the more there are no expectations. And it flushes out a bunch of stuff, and it seems to me to allow for other ideas to blossom, just flushing all this little whatever this is out. So does that help? Yeah. So I have to go into a forgiveness, reduce the expectations, and where'd that flow go? And am I putting too much pressure on myself? When you've got the car wide open and you're going 120, you might want to back off a little bit. Yeah. It's never good to run an engine completely wide open. And I think that could be what happens to me.
Okay, interesting. So when you say go back to doodling, is that like allowing yourself just to play without expectation?
Exactly. Yeah. When I remove my expectation, it can change the game. But it's getting me to believe it and to really feel it, rather than take it as an intellectual exercise. I've still got to take it down to my heart level. I still got to get it into my essence, that it's okay just to goof around, to make mistakes, and that it worked the other day. I think I did 4 images of a May storm in a variety of interpretations, and then I got into over a half a dozen little 6x12 drawings, and then poof, I came out the other side with something completely new, and yeah. I made it through that one. The pits are horrible.
I love it. I love the I love that you don't allow yourself to get into the pit. Circling the pit, I like that, and finding a way to.
Well, it just brings on heavy drinking and bad behavior.
That's where I've been going wrong.
Oh, take up some heavy drinking and bad behavior, and then you'll go, no, circle the pit. Don't dive in there.
Okay, so in terms of other artists, whether it's painting or sculpture, music, or whatever, who inspires you, and why?
Ooh, painters wise, that's real easy. Wayne Thiebaud, who's a Northern California painter, and Richard Diebenkorn. I worked with Thiebaud, and his ease and the light and the color, just a great person, and we both doing still lifes. And his approach was so kind. And his imagery, and Dick Diebenkorn the same way, just the imagery, the painterliness. It's smart, but it's not over anybody's heads. It's accessible. So those are my big painters. For musicians, I'm an old school Deadhead. I miss Jerry. Still miss Jerry.
The
like
Grateful Dead, I presume you're referring to.
Yeah. Is there any
just
other?
for anyone who didn't pick up the reference.
Yeah. I used to vend on tour. There was even one show in Pittsburgh. I did some live painting back in '88 before live painting was big. But yeah, why not? Musicians wise, here in the Arkansas, in Northeast Arkansas. So we're up against the Mississippi River. We're the left side of the Mississippi River, where people think Mississippi River Delta, so they go to Mississippi. It's on both sides of the river. So on social media, I run Arkansas Delta Juke Joints, and repost a lot of, like B.B. King had a place in Parkin, Arkansas. So B.B.'s kind of a homeboy. Muddy Waters, Sonny Boy Williamson 2, Pine Top Perkins. That's here. That's from this dirt. That's part of this narrative.
Lucky enough to see B.B. King many years ago, and still a highlight. Such energy, and I'm wondering, do you draw some of your energy from that? Is from other artists doing their thing? Is that a distraction?
Well, I had a conversation with, are you familiar with Sunny Sunshine Payne?
No.
From radio dude from Helena. He did the King Biscuit Hour.
Yeah, no.
Okay, the KFFA. But anyhow, so Sunny died last year, but Sunny promoted BB and Muddy and all these guys, right? Real life, really nice guy. So I'm on the radio with Sunny, and we're talking about it, and the music for BB and these guys comes from the dirt, right? Okay, so it's kind of sensitive because you got some picking cotton, and as a friend recently said, there's blood in those fields. And I was like, great, you've just screwed up my week. Now I see the fields as red, and I have guilt. And before, I felt that I could have been a voice to what would have happened in those fields. But I relate to musicians for whatever reason, and musicians seem to relate to me. But for me, I do seem to have whatever kind of relationship with this dirt, and I don't know how to explain that. But a lot of it comes from staring at this dirt, and the music comes from this dirt. The water tower that you liked, well, that's over by Johnny Cash's boyhood home.
Wow.
That was part of a New Deal community for Roosevelt's, where you get 20 acres and a mule. So that's in that dirt too. His song 5 Foot High and Rising, that's this area.
Okay.
That's this narrative. So I don't know if BB were around. Well, BB's daughters are around over there in Parkin. There are a few children around. I'd be interested to hear what he would have to say about the visual work. But I know from one of his stepdaughters that there's a connection, and it's just something that when you're here and you're part of it, you get it. And it seems to be part of the romance that people from other areas of the world have with this Mississippi River Delta music. The blues, basically.
The blues. Yeah, love it.
The blues. Let's just lay it down there. The blues.
I'm not going to keep you all day.
Damn, I was having so much fun. All right, time to go.
We can keep going for a while, but
yeah. No, I can make your ears bleed. They'll send you sympathy now.
Well, yes, as we say, I can talk underwater with a mouthful of marbles, as we say. So,
I dare you, double dog dare you. I got a glass of water right here.
I'll give it a crack. What advice would you give to young creatives, young artists about being creative? What if you could go back and talk to your 8-year-old self, I think you mentioned, and give her some advice, what would it be?
Get over yourself and listen to your elders and make notes, even though that they're being pushy. I think that would probably be my first one. So I remember what my mother and grandmother had taught me so well. But the biggest one is, if you really want to do something, just do it. There are going to be people who tell you you can't. But the deal is, you've got to show up. You've got to be consistent. You've got to be dedicated to it. But don't smother yourself in that dedication. It's like the flip side to it is you get real compulsive on your creative and get real compulsive on your practicing in the studio. But it doesn't come out of a vacuum. It comes from the people who've come before us. It comes from the people in your community. But don't stop. Just because somebody says you're dirt, don't stop, because everybody has an opinion.
That's
even
true.
if it's your parent. Even if it's your parent. If it's something that you really feel strongly about, do it. As long as it doesn't hurt anybody. Let's be real clear there.
Fair enough.
I saw Norwood and she said do it, so I'm blaming her. No.
So I'm hearing this.
I go back, when I hit dry spots, I go back and I get on YouTube and I look up Dick Devencorn's 10 suggestions to a young artist. Patti Smith has an awesome, it's an hour-long interview that was done at a graduation ceremony. And the stories come back to the trials and tribulations, and to keep showing up and to keep doing it and to know the pit's going to be there. So work with it.
So I'm hearing let's see if I can say this back to you. I'm hearing a thread here of turn up, keep turning up. So consistency, and no matter what, keep turning up. Perseverance. Stay connected.
Look, all that somebody can tell you is no, and all you can tell yourself is no.
True.
So why not, try it.
Listen to your elders. I'm going to replay this to my kids when I get back later on.
Yeah, and that's really hard. It's really hard, especially to listen to other people when you think you're hot shit and you're young and you're in your 20s and you've got all the answers, and you tell everybody to flip off, and all of a sudden you turn around 20 years later going, damn, what was it they were saying? Dang.
I think it's just, that's part of the cycle. And I'm hearing stay connected. So whether that be with community or whatever, so that that's part of your
I think so. For me right now in a transition, looking for a home and looking for a community to plug into is really huge. Yeah, we can all do stuff by ourselves, but the conversation's so much more fun when you've got like-minded people who can rattle the cage with you,
Yeah, very true. Challenging.
Because I really like rattling the tree, shaking the tree. What else can happen? What else can happen? What else can happen?
Yeah.
What else you want to do, David?
Yeah, well, exactly. And so that's the saying, being challenged. And if you're not connected, you're not being challenged. Yeah.
And connected, as I hear you say the words connected, I even think of connection to self. Because it can be really easy to stay in denial about what could bring you pain or what can bring you joy. When you think through the filters, like I'm thinking this way, well, maybe it's because this filter, you don't know the filter's there. This has happened to me recently where I didn't know that I was seeing through a filter. And then to get rid of the filter, and it's like, okay, we're okay. But I did not realize how disconnected I had allowed myself to be. When you acquiesce responsibility, when you let somebody else, like say it's time to cook dinner. So you go, okay, yeah, you go ahead and you cook dinner. You got your hands free and I'm kind of preoccupied. But then when you're sitting down to eat, you can't say, well, this isn't what I wanted. right?
Right.
So I think I recently have done that to myself.
Very interesting.
Do you see what I'm
Yeah, I
saying?
do.
Yeah, we're you know, we could, like, if you tell your drummer, okay, you set the rhythm, and then you come back and go, no, I don't like that rhythm, and the drummer's going, but you told me, you know, come on, you know, let's ownership.
So an awareness of self is
Awareness of self.
is critical as part of the process here, so that you are aware of what you actually want, so that you can articulate that even to yourself.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because even working on a drawing last night, it was like I felt all the reservations within me. I felt all the restrictions come up, go, no, 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 you want it like this, you want it like this. And then there was this little teeny weeny voice that was going, but you want the road to do that. And it was like, what? And I had to go back to that little voice that was in the back of the classroom and like pick him up and come walk to the front of the classroom and say, now, what were you saying again? Because I think that you, this little voice, this little scared, timid idea, I think that you've got it. It's just, how do I get you to the front of the class? So it was that one little moment where I wanted the road to hook, because that road needed to, and it needed that energy. And I just did that one line and it was like, hands off, stop. And I brought that piece that I was afraid of, that one little voice from the back of the room that's going, what if, what if, what if? When everybody else was going, all right, this is cool. No, no, this is cool. I was like, okay, come on, what if? And I guess that goes back to being connected to self.
Yeah.
Where if you're listening, or if I am listening, and if I am brave enough. And then there's the discussion of really, what do you have to lose? This is just a piece of paper. And then there's all the, oh, no, it's more than just a piece of paper. It's 40 years, it's 50 years, it's that road, it's rice field, it's the blue under the trees and the greens on top. Oh. So peeling the onion.
Yeah. I love it. Listening.
But if I don't do it, I get guilty.
Yeah.
So go figure that one out, Dr. David.
Dr. David. Yeah, no, I got nothing.
Oh, that's it. This is Dr. David podcast.
I got nothing, Norwood. That's what
There's people around here and say, I pray for you. And I say, thank you.
That's why I'm doing this, so that I can distill all your wisdom and possibly learn something along the way.
Oh, my father and grandfather were salesmen, so we could all say we were just full of shit.
Well,
salesman.
I'll let you in on something that's been my nickname all my life. So, yeah,
bring it.
Full of being my surname. So, there you go. I'm just outing myself, full of shit. That's what everyone calls me. So it's all good. Oh,
well,
hang on.
Better to be full than empty.
I'm glad that was just
better to be full than empty.
I thought I'd lost you for a second.
Yes. Oh, yeah, it's me.
Stay with me. Stay with me.
Well, what do you do with your creative process now that you've parsed all the stuff?
You're not supposed to turn the tables, no. That's
chicken. Come on.
Chicken. Yeah, no. Well, it's very good. The point that I make is turning up, and for me, it's a big factor. Is just actually turning up, and it's part of my morning ritual. I get out in this is my office come studio, and one of the first things I'll do on any given day is pick up my guitar, even if I don't play it. And I was telling someone this the other day, in terms of, say, learning an instrument, I think it's really important to become familiar at that really deep sort of physical, spiritual level, and say, even if you don't feel like playing it, hold it. So part of my process is just being there, and I'll pick it up and I'll see where it goes. And I have a little rule that I'm going to try very hard not to judge while I'm in the moment. So I will see where it goes. I'll follow the rabbit down the rabbit hole and just see where it takes me. And I'll judge it later. But that's why I have a bit of an issue as a musician with genres. When people say, what genre? And I say, I don't know, it's music. I'm comfortable writing, whatever, a jazz piece or a lullaby or whatever. It's because I'll go where it takes me. So that's a big part of my process, is just letting it happen.
So as I would relate to that, that would have been the filter being removed because you're allowing yourself to let the process wander.
Yeah, and that's exactly, and to play, to not try to get out of the way.
But you could be like Jason Isbell. He used to sleep with his guitar. In the interview with Sam Jones, he talked about sleeping with his guitar.
I don't know how my wife would feel about that, but yeah. Yeah. I've not tried that yet, but we'll, I'm open.
I think he was a kid at the time. Yeah, I don't know what you talk about. Maybe. A lot of bad jokes in that. I see them coming.
A lot, yeah. Maybe ukulele. So it just takes up less room. Something like that. But I think that, that just being in that, allowing it. I think, allowing yourself to be there and let it happen, and putting yourself in a position where it can happen. That's a big part of my process. And
so you spend time getting out of the way?
Yeah. Well, that's the hard part, I think, is building muscle, getting out of the way.
It is, and in the Mel Robbins 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, that was one of the biggest things that I found. With all the intention, I still needed to let go and get out of the way. I was reminded there is a bigger plan. We are just formulated energy, and get out of the way.
Absolutely, and I have all those voices in my head too. So but there's
schizophrenic.
That's a whole other podcast. But nonetheless.
Well, 18 of them, depending on how many voices you have.
Yeah, well, quite a few. That's if I run out of people to interview, I'll just sit here and talk to myself. So
you wouldn't be the only one. I'm meeting more and more people lately, creative friends of mine who are beginning, and I don't know why we haven't been doing this, but the conversation has been, I started talking out loud.
Well,
I'm talking to myself out loud. And it's really curious because it's just been in the past 6 months where friends are coming forward, creative, producing friends saying, do you talk to yourself out loud? Because I've started talking to myself out loud.
I do. But
now, do you do it with the accents?
Well, I could try that too. It'd be interesting. All right, I'm going to wind it up with...
Okay.
Well, we'll see. It may not wind up, but I'm going to ask you one more question. And that is... Who should I interview next? Who would you like me to interview? And maybe I'll throw a challenge out if you can't answer it now, to perhaps see if you can think of 3 people you'd love me to interview and why you'd like me to interview them.
Oh, wow. Are they real people? I mean, are they accessible people, or are they just long daydream people? I mean, are these people you can really... Because Wayne Thiebaud, I think he's 97 now, and he's a great painter, Northern California, and you could even contact his people and say, blame Norwood. She gave this as a challenge to me.
Well,
and Wayne will give you sympathy notes, I'm sure. The next one, well, heck, you got to interview Bob Weir. I mean, you're down there in Australia, and that's where Bear was living down there till he had his accident. So I would definitely say Bobby, because Bobby's got family down where you are, and well, it's Bob Weir.
Oh, I will try. There's no guarantees here, but I'm going to try.
And then I'd interview all your kids and find out what your kids have learned from you about the creative process. Because if you're raised with a musician, like me being raised the way I was raised, I'd be interested to know how formal their observations are, how much structure they have applied to the creative process, which is just, like warm salt water. There's not a whole bunch of structure in there unless you bring it.
That's interesting. I'll see how.
I bet it'd be a good family conversation too.
I'll see how I go there. It'd be like, Dad, really, bugger off. But I might.
Well, you could use it as a threat. If somebody gets in trouble, that's it. Boom, podcast.
I'll ask. My daughter's in their 20s. We'll see. That's a challenge. I'd be interested to see what they say.
Well, they play instruments.
They don't to the degree that I have. So they have tinkered. There's and there is a physical thread there. I'll be interested to see if they continue as they get older.
Or the engineers.
That's another hot. Well, actually, they're more in. Both of them are in allied health. But nonetheless, you're right. I'll be interested to see what having a creative person or father figure, I'll be interested to see where that goes. That's an interesting conversation. Could be a whole other podcast series, actually.
Well, I think it would, as a child and a grandchild of serious creatives. My mother raised me as a portrait artist and was doing 8 portraits a year. And by the time I went to college, was pulling in 6 digits. She was not 1/10 of 1%. My mother did the real deal.
Wow.
My mother's mother painted lawyers and governors in oils that people would sit for her.
Wow.
Right. So I think children of creatives, just like if somebody were children of a banker or children of salespeople, I think that there's some skills that get passed down that as more and more kids start looking into the phone and becoming sheeple, that we will lose that tangibility or that connectedness to our process as a culture. And I think there's some families that can, I know my family, the Norwoods, have held on to that culture. Norwood women are just different. We all seem to be that way. But with you and me being your first in this podcast series, I would challenge you to interview your kids.
Challenge accepted. Let's see how it goes.
Yeah!
I'm up for it. I don't know if they'll be up for it, but I'm up for it. I'll have to find a whole bunch of good questions to ask them.
Oh, just email me if you need some extra ones.
Done. I think that's yeah, well, I'll let you know. But that's
cool beans.
Fantastic idea. Cool beans indeed. Yeah.
Thanks, David.
Well,
I've enjoyed
this. It's been an absolute thrill. I've enjoyed it immensely. And as I said, folks, I'm going to put Norwood's website details on the show notes.
Yeah, you find me on the Facebook and message me, and I'm accessible and all that stuff. You got any questions? I'm happy to make your ears bleed.
Brilliant. Thank you for being number one. You'll always be number one, Norwood.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you very much, David.
I'm gonna
have a great.
I'll get you just to stay online. I'm going to end the recording here, and we'll have a quick chat afterwards. And but thank you again.
You're welcome.